What?
गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गनर शॉट। गनर शॉट में आप सबका दोबारा स्वागत है एंड जय हिंद। Sorry, I couldn't come live yesterday and the day before because actually my computer crashed and I had a lot of problems to retrieve all what I had done, and so I'm back now. And that was it. And every time I thought it was ready, it was giving me problems. But आज हम देखेंगे कारगिल के बारे में। इस टाइम 25 साल पहले कारगिल में क्या हो रहा था? By now, we had recovered or regained Tololing. We had captured Tololing back, and we were en route, or preparatory operations for capture of Tiger Hill were, underway. The tide had turned by now, and things were going farther ahead. But today, I'm not going to talk of that. उसके बारे में एक महीना है. Till Kargil Vijay Divas, we'll talk about how we did what we did. But we need to know what Pakistan did, because Pakistan will always do this again. I discussed this, इसके बारे में हमने बात in some detail with General P.R. Kumar, and when he spoke about Kohe Paima. This is an extension of that talk. And I'm now going to discuss what was Pakistan's Himalayan blunder in this. Okay. Now, this entire story, or what I'm going to say, is basically excerpts this kitab se, from Kargil to the Sea by Nasim Zahra, which I think is the best book on Kargil war. I read all of them, Pakistani, Indian, everything. From a Pakistani perspective, it lays out everything. It also gives you an insight कि पाकिस्तान के साथ कल के दिन या कभी भी, when we deal with them, how you deal with, you have to be aware of how they're going to behave. I think that's the most important thing about this book, the amount of detail. And this lady has not spared anything in this book. Remember, she is a complete devout Pakistani. She's written it from a Pakistani point of view with Pakistani thinking. She goes to the extent of saying that the whole idea was a noble way of thinking as to how to sort out India, but it was an ignoble method which she's worried about. She's not worried about the idea, she's worried about the method. But then it gives a whole thing. What is the hinge of the plan? ये कारगिल हुआ क्यों? अगर आप देखोगे तो this was plain military revenge against India's occupation of Siachen Heights. Right? This is their way of thinking. In 84, we captured Siachen, or rather occupied our areas of Siachen, legally ours. And Pakistan felt that we had done it illegally. They wanted a military revenge. So the basic motive of this plan was revenge. That you have to understand. There's nothing political about it. Okay, what is the hinge of the plan? It was to choke the movement to Srinagar and Leh. Right? From Srinagar to Leh. Ambushes, attack isolated posts, everything. It was a planned op to disrupt and capture the lifeline. They felt that the NH-1A was the lifeline to Siachen, and they have to capture that. Okay. Why is it called a Himalayan blunder? And the good thing which when I read the book, I got it was one of their previous 10 Corps commanders. I'll tell you what 10 Corps is all about. Called it a Himalayan blunder. Right? Let's read the thing. He says, Lieutenant General Gulzar, right, would subsequently criticize the op as a blunder of Himalayan proportions. He says that, when I took over command of 10 Corps, I had to put my troops on a leash because they would say we can move forward since we are on a height, right? Which means that, a large part of this LAC was unoccupied by both sides. And the Pakistanis always felt that they could go over. But people never wanted to go because the logistics were not there. Later, you know, ISI's, one of the ISI's Major General wrote an unsound about this operation as an unsound military plan based on invalid assumptions launched with little preparations and in total disregard to the regional and international environment, and it was bound to fail, right? And he says it's a total disaster. But then that I'm now putting the cart before the horse. We have to go back and see what the cart was all about. Let me start there. Let's understand this whole fundamental geography of this place. If you have a look at it, to Leh and Siachen, there were two routes back in those days. One was from Jammu, Srinagar, Kargil to Leh, which was the standard route through Zojila Pass. The other was from Chandigarh, right? Chandigarh, Manali, Upshi to Leh. This was a route which was not well developed. It was used to be open only 2 to 3 months in a year, and not it never carried that much. It never had the capacity to take so much, material to Siachen. So this they felt, look, was going near. This route was going near the LOC. The LOC is the line in purple, and where it ends is 9848, and from there onwards it's a Siachen Glacier. So they felt, look, if we can get hold of this route between Dras and Kargil, people in Siachen will not get any way to be replenished. Mind you, even now, the area of Leh Ladakh is completely, closed for 3 months in a year, except through the air. But now, of course, things have changed with Rohtang Tunnel and Zojila Tunnel going to be 24/7. And think, it'll be a 365-day approach. But back then, 25 years back, if you interrupted movement on this route during the summer months, things would go bad, right? That was the whole plan. And for that, they planned multiple intrusions. And the basic intrusions were from the area of Tiger Hill, Tolo, capture of, they occupied Tiger Hill. They occupied Tololing, Kaksar Heights, Jubar, Kalubar, and Chorbatla, right? And now these were the areas which they, got hold of. These were the encroachments. They were just sitting on top of the National Highway 1 Alpha. This was the battle, Tololing, from the road as you look at it. This is how Tololing looks at you. And this is how Tiger Hill is. The valley underneath is the Dras Valley or the Dras village. And anyone sitting in these heights on Tololing or Tiger Hill could bring accurate fire down onto the National Highway 1 Alpha, which ran through the valley. तो ये है कहानी यहाँ का कि अगर आप इस हाइट्स के ऊपर बैठ जाते हो तो you can choke the whole NH1 Alpha. And this place was devoid of cover. If you have a look at it, these are soldiers taking, shelter behind, rocks and small hillocks. And on top is Tololing. The right highest feature is Tololing. Anyone sitting on Tololing could actually, see the whole area around. No one could approach. It was very difficult. Right? What Indian Army did was fantastic. But that I'll leave it to another day. We'll talk of what the whole story about Pakistan. Now, to understand Kargil, you have to understand the timeline of Kargil, which is important, and that's why I got this. देखिए कारगिल जब हुआ था, ये कारगिल अचानक नहीं हुआ. एक तो हमने बोल दिया आपको कि रिवेंज ऑफ सियाचिन वाज द बेसिक रूट कॉज. राइट. उसके बाद इंडिया पाकिस्तान के लड़ाई चलता गया. बट व्हाट इज इंपॉर्टेंट इज द होल थिंग स्टार्ट्स with the India-Pakistan nuclear blast of 98. इस वक्त मामला पलट गया because Pakistan felt they were at parity with India and now they could do anything. Right, and this comes out very clearly in Nasim Zehra's book. The next important point of this is that in October 98, Pervez Musharraf was appointed the Chief of Army Staff. Remember this timeline. I'm going to talk of Pervez Musharraf later. The planning for Kargil started the moment he took over as the Chief of Army Staff, way back in 98. It was not in 99. And when the Lahore Declaration was on, people were already across the LOC, sitting in our territory. The infiltration was detected in May 99, but it started in October 98. The Battle of Tololahing started on 27th May. That was when we got our act together and we captured Tololahing by 13th May. That was the first significant achievement we had, 13th June. That was the first significant achievement we had got. And then we captured Tiger Hill by 6th July. It led to a coup in Pakistan later on in October 99. And it followed up with the parliament attack on 2001. Okay, so this is the broad timeline of events in Kargil. But did Kargil happen on its own? Just because Musharraf took over in 98, he started this plan? No. The Pakistanis were making this a plan in Kargil earlier. So when did this start? This started around 85, 86, 87. 85, 86, 87. The Pakistanis were planning to get hold of Kargil. Okay. Immediately after we captured Siachen. So, what was their plan earlier? Their plan was that Pakistani troops will go across LOC, set up posts in Kargil sector, block the main artery, so that India is forced to negotiate with Pakistan. All I'm rating in this slide are excerpts from this book. Then Pakistan will demand unconditional Indian withdrawal from Kargil. Interestingly, Ziaul Haq opposed this plan. Okay. He felt that India will go for an all-out war if Pakistan is choked. Right? And that is something he was not prepared to go in for. They wanted to use paradrops. And they wanted to use a battalion paradrop across the LOC in Kargil area. And they would hold posts across in our territory till such time the ground offensive comes. A very daring plan, but the Air Force they had a different view. They felt it was a dangerous plan. They could not do such low drops in high altitudes. The plan was tactically good. The Air Force felt it was strategically bad because they couldn't do it. And then the Afghan war was on at that time, and they felt that this could not be executed when the center of attention and focus was the Afghan war against Russia. 84-85 की बात है ये. And they felt that look, we'll use the Mujahideen later on. And when the drawdown takes place, then we'll restart the whole thing. The interesting part in this, which I find, is that look, the Pakistan Air Force wanted, rather, the Pakistan Army wanted always to do a paradrop and an airdrop across the LOC. The Pakistan Air Force said we can't do it. What is the relevance of this? The relevance of this is even today, the PLA can't do an airdrop against us in the LAC. Their conditions are even worse. The same conditions mitigate extensive air operations against us in the LAC. So that's the one major thing which comes out when you go back in history and read. Okay, 85, 86, there was a plan made, failed. 96, the plan gets revived. Okay, so after 10 years. So this was before Musharraf took over. Okay, what does this plan say? He says they retrieved the plan and took it to the then chief Jahangir Karamat. The inter-services team was, formed to study the plan. They went to Kargil. They went, assessed everything, and then they felt, look, you can't use the Mujahideen and all that. And how can you make the Mujahideen and the Pakistan army fight together? And it would be difficult to use irregular troops with regular uh, troops, and the Air Force will not be able to give close air support. Even in 96, 10 years after the whole story, 85, 86, when they planned this air intrusion, 96 again they said we can't do it. So two, three things had become clear by now. That air intrusion was out, using irregulars was out. Both these were their own conclusions. So that means by 96, there was two things which are out, but then the plan was crystallizing. How to do it without air and without Mujahideen or irregulars. Okay. Musharraf later also believed that time was running out for India or for Pakistan. And he felt that it was a conventional military force which has to be used. In fact, as DJ Musharraf wargamed a Kargil-like situation in Pakistan. And this was during Benazir Bhutto's time. In fact, somewhere in this, he has said, Nasim Zehra has said, that this plan was also presented to Benazir Bhutto. Okay. And it was obviously not, it was rejected because the repercussions at that point of time were too much. So, what changed after the whole story? What changed from 96? Two things changed. One, the moment the Pakistanis, went nuclear, they felt they had the capability of going across and doing what they wanted. And then, of course, Musharraf. Musharraf had been in Siachen, tasted defeat in Siachen. He had a clear anti-India stance. He was an India hater. If you remember, when Vajpayee ji went to Lahore, he even refused to salute him as part of the official thing. So the whole story was very clear. It was a completely predetermined operation conceived by a gang of four, as Nasim Zahra puts it. Okay. Now, who's the gang? This is a gang of four. This was the first on top left, of course, was Pervez Musharraf, who till his dying day kept saying that Kargil was a successful operation. Why it was a successful operation? As per him, it focused the problem of Kashmir in the international media, and Pakistan achieved its aims. The next on the right was the Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Azim Khan. देखिए इनका, okay, Aziz Khan. He was the Chief of General Staff. Then on the left bottom is Lieutenant General Mahmood, Commander 10 Corps. Now, 10 core is the critical core opposite us, opposite India's 14 core and 15 core, which covers the entire area from Rawalpindi to Siachen. And the fourth person of the gang was Major General Javed Hussain, who was GOC FCNA for the post commander northern areas, just opposite 14 Corps. At that time, 14 Corps was not there, it was 15 Corps. These four were the only guys who knew, that this operation was going to go through. In fact, they planned it. They kept it secret from everyone. They kept it secret from their own army. They kept it secret from their politicians. They kept it secret from everyone. So when people say, look, India, there was an intelligence failure, I disagree with it. How can there be an intelligence failure of something which was not known even to the Pakistanis? Right? The whole thing got unfolded only in May. Yeah, there were certain operational failures on which we should have no doubts. Right? Definitely there were operational failures, but intelligence failures, very difficult. I mean, just think when the Lahore Declaration was signed by by Prime Minister Vajpayee in his famous bus after his bus trip to Lahore. When all this was going on, these guys were sitting across the LOC. They had already intruded. They were sitting in Tololing and Tiger Hill and the post thereafter. So you have to understand this whole thing in that context. Okay, what is 10 core? Which is why is it relevant? Because 10 core actually across the LAC covers the entire area from opposite Jammu to Siachen. So the GOC 10 core is an important man in this whole story, and he was part of the gang. So these four individuals were the ones who did the entire planning and everything. And Musharraf, who was the DGMO, who had done the wargaming, everything, knew that Air Force can't be used. No point using irregulars. So the idea is to use regulars as irregulars and to incrementally go in and creep forward. That is the thing. The whole plan was conceived in this manner. What they couldn't do, they eliminated. So they played with what they had. And right. Okay, now let me get back to the book. Okay. Now, what happened is that the moment Musharraf took over as the chief, he went to the northern areas. All these four chaps, this gang, got into a helicopter and went actually over the LOC. And at some places, they crossed the LOC. And they found that there was no reaction from India. The moment they saw that there were vacant spaces and they went undetected, they got emboldened. They said, look, now we can go across. And this very clearly Nasim Zehra brings out in her book. Okay. Now, that was not the only thing. The gang had four basic assumptions as per Nasim Zehra, which they felt would guarantee the success of Kohima. Okay, what were these four assumptions? Because these four assumptions are the fundamental assumptions based on which this operation was planned and executed by the Pakistanis. Right. First, each post being held was impregnable and that we could not take it back. They'll establish such strong posts. The second assumption was that Indians did not have the will or determination to take on Pakistan in a fight and would not make any serious effort to regain the heights. This is what she's written in the book actually. Third, as far as the international context was concerned, Pakistan need not worry because there would be no external pressure. Why would there be no external pressure? Because Pakistan was an important cog in the international set of events. Fourth, that the army recognized the economic crunch faced by the country, and therefore the government would not be asked for any extra resources for the operation. The army would use its own resources to fulfill the financial requirement. The whole story is very clear that they will do it within these four assumptions. And the basic assumption was that they will win. There was no question of that will they lose. There was no question. There was no doubt in the minds of the gang of four that they will lose. Okay. This is important because uh, for one reason or the other, whatever Pakistan does, it feels it cannot lose. And I've said this earlier also. Pakistan undertakes actions with the premise that it cannot lose. And if it loses, the Pakistan army gains politically. And that's what happened in this case also. This is the story of Pakistan army repetitively. It feels it cannot lose, but it loses. And despite its military loss, it gains politically. That's what we need to understand about whatever we do with Pakistan. Okay. Now, there were 5 phases of this operation which were planned. Okay. Let me go through these 5 phases because these are the phases in which the operation, Kohe Paima, was planned by Pakistan. And we didn't come to know about it probably till the third phase. Phase 1, occupy Kargil Heights to cut off National Highway 1 Alpha and dry out supplies to Siachen. The whole story was this, and this started in October 98. Phase 2, infiltrate freedom fighters into Leh and Ladakh to start insurgents in the area. So when the regular troops were getting across the LOC, they wanted to infiltrate freedom fighters. And so on one side, on the east in Leh, there would be insurgency there. In phase 3, apply pressure on the Indian forces from the flanking sectors through the operations of these infiltrating groups and force the Indians to start bringing their troops to Ladakh and Jammu, leaving the valley virtually drained of troops. So, occupy heights, go across, instigate Leh and Ladakh, increase levels of violence out there. India reacts with forces from the valley. The valley is then vacated. If the valley is vacated, rush in large number of freedom fighters into the valley and block the Banihal and Zojila passes, thereby isolating the valley and occupying the area. And all this would be done within Pakistan Army's resources. The plan is audacious as much as it is foolish. And in phase 5, the Indians would be begging on their knees for talks, and Pakistan can dictate its terms. So this was the fundamental precept and assumptions and the phases of the operation. That it didn't happen that way is because of one fundamental thing, that they felt that India will not be able to react the way it did. This problem will continue with Pakistan always. Okay. Now let's go into the various phases of Kohe Paima. As per in this book, Nasim Zaira's book, it had 6 overlapping phases, and I'll go through these 6 phases, and then we can discuss. Phase 1 was the euphoria phase. Very interesting. The Kargil clique, the gang, call it whatever you want. The Kargil clique planned Operation Kohima in complete secrecy is not the thing. Where did the euphoria come from? The euphoria came from the belief that Pakistan's nuclear leverage has driven a full scale confrontation out of the realm of possibilities. Okay, we have nuclear now, so India can't react. Then there's a miscalculation that blocking NH1, India's lifeline, would result in the Indian armed forces withdrawing from Siachen. Very major miscalculation. They didn't realize India's capability to keep this road open and India's capability to keep Leh and Siachen alive despite this blocking for some point of time. Okay, General Musharraf and the clique could plan a surreptitious operation across the LAC and Indians would never fight back. Now, the euphoria came, if during the planning, based on this supposedly irrefutable facts, the military and diplomatic success of Operation Cohen Paima was guaranteed. This is what she writes. This is a thinking. It's a euphoric thinking. That success is there. Only thing is we have to do it. Okay. And then the second phase was the excitement phase. That is, how did this come about? She says its planners and participants met with no resistance from Indians. For the Pakistanis, they just walked into this area. The theater was almost empty. The uncontested vacant spaces were very alluring. Okay, and when India vacated those winter vacated posts, Pakistanis felt that they were going unopposed and it was a virtual walkover. And India's weak aerial surveillance of the Dras Kargil area was an added advantage. And the Kargil clique, led by operational commander Javed Hassan, boasted of complete success. So, in the period between October and May, they kept coming in. We vacated those posts, they came and occupied all of them. And they felt they had succeeded because they felt that the moment they come and occupy those posts and they're firmed in out there, they're impregnable, and then India will get choked. This was their plan, and they were excited about it. Right? But then that didn't happen that way. Then once they reached their initial objectives, and this is where I thought Pakistan started losing the whole story. What Nasim Zahra writes is, due to the absence of the Indian resistance, the COs and their troops went beyond the original lines drawn. Okay, for 8 months, Pakistani troops did not encounter a single Indian soldier despite the audacious setting up of 116 posts. When they went, they didn't find anything, then they continued going. In doing so, what did Pakistan do? They overstretched. And if you see, Pakistan always overstretched. Overstretch is a normal habit of Pakistan. उनका काबिलियत इतना होता है, कोशिश इतना होता है, and it collapses. That's what happened in Afghanistan also. That's how what you see what's happened. They overstretched themselves when they installed the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, against which now they're facing problems. But then that's a different story. But let's get back to Kargil. So they set up 116 posts, right? And the second thing is they went beyond what they wanted to do because they felt going ahead would give them a better control over the national highway. And since there was no resistance, dushman to tha nahi, it was just going ahead, marching and occupying those posts. In doing so, they did two things went awry. One, the logistics went bad because the more number of posts ahead means greater amount of logistics, which they didn't have the capability. Second, they went out of firepower. The moment you put so many posts across, you need firepower to support them, which is not there. Okay. Now, here comes the counter. By end May, India started getting the hang of what's happened. By mid-May, we started understanding what was. I mean, we started realizing what was happening. By end May, we were very clear what the whole story is. And what she writes, the Indian Army realized that Pakistan had worked out a well-planned, elaborate intrusion to threaten India's military strategic position in Jammu and Kashmir. Caught in the fog of war throughout May, they were now beginning to sense the unusual scale and nature of the Pakistani intrusions. So this is where the story started turning for Pakistan. October to May, they had a free run, and hereafter, they were always on the back foot. And this, coming from a Pakistani author, in absolute clear terms, gives you an idea as to what actually happened. Okay, now is the encounter phase. Now, this you have to understand from a Pakistani viewpoint, what he has written. And it's a eye opener. Beginning in early May, with limited and indirect hostilities between Pakistani and surprised Indian troops. Uh, the hostilities were, rather the fighting mid-May, beginning May, and till what third week of May was sporadic. Both sides were confused by the encounters. Right, Kargil planners were unclear about the type and scale of the Indian military response to be expected because we had just started and our response was not coordinated. Okay, this was also the time when actual firing started. Suddenly, everyone realized what's the level and what's the extent of this operation. The clique of four generals plan was revealed to the wider military command and also to Pakistan's Prime Minister and his cabinet. This happened around 17th of May. On our side, we were also confused as to what is this happening. Okay. And she says by early June, it snowballed into a battle. And the battle started with the Battle of Tololim. Right. So far, from the Pakistani side, it was smooth, unhindered, and all fine. But then it turned into a Pakistan-India battle of attrition. The next thing is important. Once there was clarity in Delhi of the scale and depth of the Pakistan intrusion across the LOCs, India decided to hit back with overwhelming military and diplomatic might with political resolve. Aggressive military retaliation included heavy artillery and aerial attacks. So this is important. What Pakistanis didn't anticipate was that India will hit back politically, diplomatically in the international circles, and military. So the fundamental assumptions by which this whole operation was launched, by third week of May, Pakistan had lost it. Those assumptions were proven useless. And then what happened? Right. Delhi stonewalled every Pakistani effort to extract strategic advantage from Operation KP. And one of the reasons why we stonewalled everything was Pakistan didn't have a game plan. Pakistan could have well said, look, we have Kargil with us, you have Siachen, let's trade. They didn't. They were still sticking to their story of all these people being infiltrators and freedom fighters and not regulars. Okay. By early June, although holding on to heights, Pakistani troops had come under tremendous physical and psychological pressure from both the Indian military offensive and from the disruption of supply routes. So there it comes. Right. So direct firing and indirect firing on the cutting the logistics out. This is important. Why is this important? Why this is important because tomorrow against PLA in China, is something which we need to redo and rethink. I've already said air operations across the PLA and LAC will not be there. Major operations will not be there. Okay. If PLA does intrude, it will get extended without logistics this side. You hit their logistics, they're going to have a problem. If they come across, use your artillery the way you used it in Kargil, LAC is intact. In fact, across the LOC, India is at an advantage. And that I will talk about some other day when I say what are the offensive operations or offensive ideas we have against China or against China in Tibet. Okay, let's get back to yeah. Now, Pakistani troops on hostile peaks were enduring vicious weather, depleting supplies, deafening sorties, and unending mortar fire. The same thing can happen tomorrow on the LAC, right? How did the Kargil planners respond? They responded with concern, confusion, and even more bravado. The euphoria and excitement phase were no more. Finished. By then, things were bleak for them. The military encounter had extended to the diplomatic and political levels. Delhi overruled every Pakistani effort for a bilateral political dialogue. Right? On June 12th, Indian Foreign Minister categorically told his Pakistani counterpart, Sartaj Aziz, that India was willing to sit on a negotiating table only after Pakistan troop withdrawal to pre-op KP positions. The message from the Prime Minister from Beijing, that is China, and Washington was no different. The reality slowly sank in that op KP could approve no gains for Islamabad. Now again, let's draw an equivalent with what's happening across. Same thing. Whatever China planned, okay, they didn't expect Indian reaction. When we reacted the way we did across the Kailash train, they got stymied. And then they started negotiating. Right? The only difference between then and now is we didn't build enough military pressure or diplomatic pressure on China to force them to negotiate better. If probably we had done that, and there was political consensus within India, which unfortunately was not there in 2020, we would have probably in a better situation on the LAC. This is my conviction. The difference between what happened in Kargil and now is this. And this is something which we need to learn. Unless we have the political consensus within, we will not be successful against China. Okay. Fifth phase is the exit phase when this began around mid-June. When I say mid-June, around this time, once they had got beaten at Tololing, they knew that the game was up and they started withdrawing, but not fully. We still had to battle for Tiger. That came in the first week of July. It also became clear to the Prime Minister and his key advisors that with the depletion of supplies to Pakistani troops, mounting Indian attacks, and a unified global demand that Pakistan immediately and unconditionally withdraw its troops from Kargil, Islamabad had to make some hard decisions. This is a very important thing. You have to ensure that such conditions get replicated whenever there's a next opportunity or whenever there's a next time, whether it's against Pakistan or against China. Pakistan's soldiers remained under a determined and deadly Indian attack, ruling out all chances of any further operational success. Why is this talking of Kargil important? I mean, look at it from a different point of view. Why should we keep talking of Kargil? Why should we keep talking of all our operations? We need to believe that we can do something in the high altitudes. We need to do something better than the Chinese in the high altitudes. You keep talking of what you did, you keep talking of the Pakistani foolishness and everything. It puts the fear of God into China. Let me not, mince my words. It makes China think and think and think before it tries anything. And I'll talk of it on Friday when I speak with Sri Ayarji on China, right? And how India is one of the few countries which has actually put China on the back foot, right? And that's something I'll discuss over a 4 year period. And we learned a lot from this operation, but have we applied it fully is a question, but that's a different story. We'll talk about it later. Let's talk about this now. Okay. Pakistan, as per Nasim Zahra, Pakistan soldiers during the fifth phase remained under determined and deadly Indian attack, ruling out any chances of any further operational success. By June 12th, at the meeting in Lahore, attended by all the DCC members, that is the Defense Consultative Committee members, the PM asked this FM to explore ways towards an honorable exit. These included engaging the Chinese and even working on a back channel settlement attempt with Delhi. Finally, the PM opted to fly to Washington, seeking withdrawal under a futile and controversial US cover. And nothing worked. Nothing worked for the Pakistani in this case. And after this, it was only reversal. But it's interesting to me see what happened further. The sixth phase is the effect phase. What is the effect? Right? Skirmishes continued beyond July 4th. In Pakistan, the power structure had complete distrust, deep distrust, resentment, and latent antagonism between the elected leadership and the Kargil people. And this was where the divide between the Pakistan army and its political lot were complete. Right? So the military clique and the Pakistan politicians were completely divergent after this. It led to two things. It led to the military defeat of Pakistan in Kargil and withdrawal. And the second thing which happened is 6 months down the line, it led to a coup. And that's what this whole story, Kargil to a coup, is all about. How it when the coup came about. But Nasim Zahra actually outlines a lot of what actually went wrong. She talks of planning, which is, I thought, a very important thing. I'll spend a couple of minutes on this. He says they were overtaken by enthusiasm, respective experiences, and opportunity of revenge. Revenge substituted sound analysis. Okay. They factored only the local war theatre environment and lost sight of the worst case scenarios. They made no discernible effort to know the enemy. There was a faulty notion that India would have no options. And there was, of course, last thing is important, lack of clarity, orders, or instructions. The junior guys on ground never got clear-eyed orders as to what to do, how to do, till when to do, and what to do. And this is the problem of all authoritarian systems. And I think this will get replicated in, uh, across the LOC also, or rather across the LAC also. So, uh, in Kargil, their forward troops were not given supplies, they were not given air power, everything. In across the LAC, again, if you see the Yangtze operation, or for that matter, the Eastern Ladakh operation, or the Doklam operation, China has exhibited similar tendencies of hoping that India will not react. Okay. And that is why the comparison between Kargil and what's happened in across the LAC is always important. And we need to keep learning what they think. Okay. That's why I said, look, Pakistan never had a plan of trading. I think the Chinese have learned this. And that is why we are stuck in Depsan and Demchok because they're trading. We have this, what do you give us? See, we have to understand in all these issues, Pakistan army went to war, but actually it took Pakistan to war. So we have to understand that when army goes to war, it is the nation which goes to war, and the nation has to have a plan to go to war. What is the end political game? What is the political objective of this war? So when I said, like one of the American ambassadors said, Pakistan didn't have a plan. They just blundered into it out of revenge. Somewhere, I think, across the LAC, uh, China also tried this. They had a political idea, but it was based on a false premise that they will emerge victorious. Okay. Now, Nasim Zehra says that the tactics and execution of this entire plan was also faulty. And she quotes Clausewitz and everyone and says, look, it doesn't matter how good your plan is, people have to execute it. And that is something which is we have to keep learning and relearning and relearning. It doesn't matter how good our men are. I mean, how good our generals are, how good our training is, how good your everything is. The people on ground have to have the capability to win the war. And they have to be given the leeway to win the wars. Tactics and execution matters. Pure strategy doesn't matter. And I think that's where China will have problems because they focus more on the strategic part of it. Like tactics and execution is weak and something which we have to relearn about. Okay, logistics. I thought, and she goes on in this thing to explain how poorly logistics were planned by Pakistan. Pakistan planned for logistics till the intrusion. How to stay there or take the movement forward, no plan. And she explains it very well in this thing. And then this issue of creep forward. The idea is that you reach a point where you feel victory is there, and then you go ahead, and you go ahead, you go ahead, and you keep creeping forward, and then you suddenly see that you're overstretched. At a macro level, this is what is happening to China. China has overstretched itself all over the world, and it's having problems, right? And that military stretch of China is something which I will discuss maybe tomorrow, because I'm going to talk of the North Korea Russian pact and how it is affecting China and how China is getting overstretched tomorrow. Okay. Then what is the objective? Very weak. And this book describes that the objective, the political objective for Kargil was never clear. Okay. Decision making and coordination. Look, when only four chaps plan an operation and keep it secret from the rest of the army, air force, navy, and the nation, how can there be proper decision making and coordination? So there was lack of coordination between the civil and the military, military and the military, the government, diplomacy and the military, and the government and political. In fact, the government was struggling for political survival throughout this operation. So this book, you know, puts out the flaws of the entire story of Kargil from a Pakistani point of view. It's not what we talk, what they say. Okay. And then what is the impact on national, regional, and global environment? Right? The military blundered into a war and put the whole thing in the political lap. And that is where the issue of the political control over the military assumes importance. And after this, there was a clear consensus globally that Pakistan is a nation which cannot be completely trusted. That is why one of their chaps said it is Pakistan's, uh, Himalayan blunder. They lost militarily, they lost politically, they lost the global trust. And throughout the global war on terror, though USA depended on, Pakistan, then Pakistan was never trusted. It's a different thing that slowly Pakistan got over USA, became irreplaceable pawn in its game, and ultimately backstabbed USA and finished itself off. That's one of the stories which actually started then. Before that, Pakistan was the darling of the international community, and India was you know the regressive socialist country which was anti-West. And this whole story is also, in a way, mirrored in Tariq Rahman's book on Pakistan's wars. And he says the attack on Kargil was carried out in the belief that India would be too intimidated to counter because Pakistan had exploded 6 nuclear bombs in the spring of 1998. Okay. And you see the first thing he says, Pakistan military regards Indians as incompetent and timid fighters. Even though the assumption has been proven wrong and every time, it continues to persist. And this book he wrote just a couple of years back. So the thinking is there in Pakistan that we can't fight back, and they are the best fighters. And Pakistan's wars have been initiated by army without consulting either the Air Force or Navy. So if you see overall, you are looking at a system which is a law unto itself, and that has not changed. Now with Pakistan, the way it is, it's going to get even worse. And we're dealing with an army which does not mind losing, because every time it loses militarily, it gains politically. And this book is something which I would recommend all of you to read it, because I've just parroted what is in that book in an outline form. I'll take a few questions also. But as we go along, I'll then, probably in my next episode on Kargil towards the end of the month, I'll talk why Pakistan lost Kargil militarily. I'm not talking politically, I'm talking militarily. Why it lost militarily, we need to understand. Because why it lost militarily is something which we need to avoid and see, is China repeating those mistakes? So that at a tactical level, at the operational level, we are stable. Have we learned our lessons? Okay. Now I'll take a few questions, a lot of questions.